Tommy Jaggi of Fansided here with NFL expert Marcus Mosher on the No Huddle show on Stacking the Box. We're going to talk about training camp, Marcus. It's finally here. Some teams start this week, everybody else early next week. And so this is what we've been waiting for. We've had that 4 or 5 week stretch of just absolute nothingness, the longest stretch of the NFL calendar season without anything really going on. But what we want to do today is break down the biggest training camp battles around the league. And some of these are very intriguing, like to the point that I don't know if we've seen anything quite like it before. So I wanted to get your take on what do you think about this?
Well, first of all, this is one of the few years where we have like several different quarterback battles. Usually we kind of know what's going to happen. And we'll talk about like the veteran versus the rookie quarterback when it comes to the Giants. Like we have those every year, but very, very rare do we get a situation like what's going on in Indianapolis or Cleveland. So I'm excited to dive in.
All right, let's start with Cleveland, Marcus. And this is just such an unusual case because we've got 4 quarterbacks vying for the job right now. We've got the old timer, the 40-year-old Joe Flacco. We've got Kenny Pickett, who came via trade, the former first-round pick of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Was on the Eagles last year. We have Shedeur Sanders, who was a guy many believe would go in the first round, if not early in the second round, and have fallen to the 5th round. Then Dillon Gabriel, the guy that was drafted 2 rounds before him in the 3rd round by Cleveland. Like, it's a 4-headed race here, really. And I don't know how this is going to go. We're going to give our predictions for each of these battles at the end, but let's dissect them for now, Marcus, and talk about where do you think this is heading? Like, do you think that this is a true 4-way competition for the quarterback battle in Cleveland?
I don't. What I really think this boils down to, Flacco versus Pickett, and then Sanders versus Gabriel to see who is the young backup quarterback, right? Because I just don't envision any situation or scenario where Shedeur Sanders or Dillon Gabriel is the week 1 starter, right? You have a 3rd round pick and a 5th round pick. It's very, very rare to see one of the, a 3rd rounder or 5th rounder start in week 1 for a team. So I do think it's going to be Flacco or Pickett to start the year. And then eventually the Browns are going to turn their attention to one of these young quarterbacks. I don't know how to feel about the young guys yet. We'll get to those ones in a second. But between Flacco and Pickett, I do think this is going to be Flacco's job to lose, right? He's already been in Kevin Stefanski's offense before. He's played really well. He's the veteran. He's the oldest quarterback on the roster. And frankly, I think he still has the best arm of any of these 4 quarterbacks. So I fully anticipate Flacco getting the job in week 1 and maybe the Browns moving on from Kenny Pickett. But what's your read on the situation?
Yeah, I feel the same way. If Flacco doesn't beat out Pickett for that, I would be kind of surprised. And not to say that Pickett can't improve. He was an old player when he came into the league. I don't think he's shown a lot of growth. He certainly didn't in his first 2 years with the Steelers. Last year on the Eagles, we barely got to see anything from him. But Flacco is the guy who's been here. He's done this. He's won a Super Bowl. He's been to playoff games. He's the guy that's been around this league for nearly 2 decades now. And so the Browns are going to want someone experienced. And I look at the roster, Marcus, the Browns have had talent for a while now, and some pieces have came and left. They've got Myles Garrett in the prime of his career, maybe the last couple like truly elite seasons of him. Are they really going to want to put the game in the hands of Kenny Pickett? I think that if Pickett were to beat out Flacco in this sort of veteran contest, if you will, it's going to have to do it convincingly, because if the battle is close, I feel like Cleveland's going to go with the guy that has more experience, and then to cover Stefanski and in the coaching staff and to make them look good that they made the right decision bringing Flacco in. And the Pickett investment wasn't that big to begin with. When we talk about the rookies here, though, Marcus, it's like Shedeur was not the bigger investment. He was the guy that has some character stuff attached. I don't want to say off-field stuff because he's never really been in trouble. It's just his personality rubs some people the wrong way. Gabriel is the guy that they like, and they invested the higher draft pick in. But I don't think that Gabriel's ceiling is very high. He's an old quarterback. He's undersized. He has an average arm, I would say. Mm-hmm. Sanders would be, if you were to put together a rooting guide, Marcus, in terms of like, if you're a Browns fan, the way that you want them to be is like, you want Sanders to be the best of the group, because of all 4 of these quarterbacks, I feel like he's the only one with franchise QB potential.
Yeah, I would agree. I do think Dillon Gabriel fits this offense incredibly well because it's going to be a lot of play action, a lot of bootlegs, and he's just a more mobile quarterback than
Mm,
Shedeur Sanders is. And I think that's going to be part of the run game as well. Back to Kenny Pickett really quickly. I agree with you that he's going to need to convincingly beat out Joe Flacco in training camp and preseason. I don't see that happening, but I did think Kenny Pickett played better last year than we saw him in the 2 previous years with Pittsburgh. Again, the sample size is small. He started one game. He did play pretty well when he filled in for Hurts against Washington,
yeah.
but you're talking about a situation where you're playing with arguably the best offensive line in the league, arguably the best skill position group in the league. It's not going to be quite the same in Cleveland, but I do wonder, like, could Kenny Pickett eventually become a passable starting quarterback in the league? Maybe. And maybe that's all Cleveland wants for the first
Yeah.
half of the year. Somebody that can keep them in games. Again, I think it's going to be Flacco, but I won't be totally surprised if it's Pickett either.
Yeah, and I think that that was the hope for Pickett when the Steelers drafted him back in 2022, that he would be a passable level quarterback because nobody believed that the ceiling was outrageously high. But you talked about the small sample, and I will state again, in his second preseason, when fans were trying to get optimistic about him, he did have a perfect 158.3 passer rating during the preseason. It did not translate to the field, and so we'll see how it goes here. If he can convince the Browns otherwise, or not. We'll revisit this at the end of this list. But yeah, do you have something else, Marcus?
Yeah, I just want to add, I think Flacco is going to win the job, and then I think it's eventually going to go to Dillon Gabriel. Gabriel had 33 rushing touchdowns throughout his college football career. I
Mm.
think that could be the difference between him and Shedeur Sanders. He's just a much more mobile quarterback. And with this team going back under center, I do think that could help Gabriel. So I do think he is eventually going to be the starting quarterback at some point this year.
Okay, we're giving our predictions now. You want to give our
Go
predictions
ahead.
now?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that it's Flacco's job. I think it's going to be his job for 3/4 of the season. And then I think that Shedeur Sanders is going to
Okay.
come in because I just believe in the talent more in Sanders. The draft investment would say otherwise. So I'm just going to go with my original pre-draft evaluation, which was Sanders was the clear number 2 quarterback in this draft, significantly so ahead of Dillon Gabriel. We'll see if his play on the field can convince them of that. All right, let's move on to our next camp battle around the league that we need to keep an eye on. And this one is 2 polar opposite players. You couldn't get more opposite in terms of where they are in their careers, what they offer your football team. That is the Indianapolis Colts quarterback contest with Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones. Richardson can't stay healthy. He's been a train wreck at times. He's also made some of the most ridiculous throws that you can see down the football field. The talent is clearly there. He pulled himself out of a game before, which did not bode well with his teammates, with his coaching staff. Took a lot of flack from the media for that. Daniel Jones, on the other hand, is Mr. consistently in the bottom half of the league starting quarterbacks. Like, just as since the early in his career has not really done much to impress. And we kind of know who he is at this point. Now, some are holding out hope to say maybe with a new change of scenery, new coach, you go with Shane Steichen now, maybe you can be some variation of Sam Darnold. Marcus, I'm not buying it. Are you buying that? And who do you think is going to emerge in this contest?
I'm honestly not sure it's even going to be a contest. I think it's going to be Daniel Jones. And everything I'm about to say about Daniel Jones, it comes with the caveat that I think he's always going to be a bottom 16 quarterback in the league. Okay. Fully admitting that. The problem with Anthony Richardson is the flashes are there. But when you complete 47% of your passes last year, you have more interceptions than touchdowns. This is a very quarterback friendly offense that Shane Steichen runs. We saw Gardner Minshew have success in this offense, a lot of RPOs, a lot of easy throws, a lot of layups. You need to be completing a high percentage of your passes, and that's just not Anthony Richardson. And I know the talent is there. He's big, he's athletic, he's only 23. The problem is he hasn't been good. And honestly, he really hasn't been good at any point during his football career. But even going back to Florida, he was always this guy that's been a project that you're hoping would eventually figure it out. And he hasn't. And he hasn't been able to stay healthy. He's missed time over the last 2 years. And now he's dealing with yet another injury. And for all of Daniel Jones's flaws, and he has a lot of them, one of the things you can say about him is he's extremely tough and he's willing to stand in the pocket and he'll get hit and still deliver the football. And that is endearing to players. And Richardson tapping his helmet and asking out on a third down last year, I think kind of killed his credibility around the league. I think this is going to be Daniel Jones's job to lose.
Marcus, I don't disagree with you. I think that it is going to be Daniel Jones's job. However, if you are a fan of the Colts, and I got to say, like, Daniel Jones is only going to get you so far. Like, I'm convinced of that. Even if you get to a winning record somehow in that division, which is possible, it's wide open. But you're only going to go so far with that guy. And knowing that, I'd rather have the third year of Richardson, see if he can finally stay healthy, see if he can finally put things together. We knew he was raw. Like, when he was drafted, we knew he was one of the rawest quarterbacks that has really ever been drafted in this league. What did he have? Like 11, 13 games experience, and he was 21 years old. It was all fresh to him. And so I would give him that third season to prove it, or at least half of a third season to prove it. If he can't do it by then, Colts move on. Daniel Jones isn't going to get you very far. Worst case scenario, Richardson does terrible. You move on, you draft a quarterback next year because that's ultimately what's going to need to happen. Jones is not going to be your franchise guy. So that's the way that I would be rooting if I was a Colts fan. But I do agree with you. Daniel Jones, this is going to be his job. Steichen wants to keep his job. I think he is a good coach. They have skill players now. They should be able to perform respectably on offense, even if Daniel Jones is the 25th to 28th or whatever best quarterback in the NFL. I'd rather have it the other way around. But it reminds me, Marcus, of the situation we saw with Zach Wilson, another polarizing quarterback in New York a few years back, where they just couldn't do it anymore. The Jets, despite the draft investment, knowing his arm talent, they couldn't go another season with him because they had to make something work, and they knew that he wasn't the guy. I'm getting that impression with Richardson as well. Yep. And so I'm going to predict that this is Daniel Jones's job from the gate, and that Richardson's only going to see the field if an injury occurs to Daniel Jones, which is unfortunate. All right.
Remember, real quick, just remember, the Colts have seen Anthony Richardson in practice for 2 years now.
Yes.
And they went out and signed Daniel Jones to a big deal. Like, I think that kind of tells you everything that we need to know. On top of that, Richardson is already hurt. We don't even know how much time he's going to miss in training camp with his injury. My belief is that the Colts know that neither of these quarterbacks are going to be on their roster in 2026. And it's all about which quarterback gives us the best chance of developing Tyler Warren, who we just took at 14th overall, Josh Downs, Michael Pittman, A.D. Mitchell. It's probably not the quarterback that's only completing 47% of his passes. And I think I understand the philosophy of let's play the guy with more upside, because if it works out, great. And if it doesn't, well, it's going to get us a better draft pick. They've got a lot of young, talented players in this offense they have to develop. And having a quarterback that can't hit the broadside of a barn isn't doing them any favors.
Yeah, and for that, I totally understand. You have a ton of investments on offense, and you want to make sure that they're developing properly. So it makes sense what they're trying to do here with Daniel Jones. All right, let's move on to our next contest. And we're going to go to the New York Giants, and that is their quarterback competition between Russell Wilson, Jaxson Dart. We know Brian Daboll is head over heels for Jaxson Dart. That's why they traded back up into the first round to make sure they landed him. Having said that, Daboll's job is on the line. Joe Schoen's job is on the line. Like, they have to have a successful season. I don't think they can afford to have that another year as pitiful as the way that things have been trending so far for this team. Does Russell Wilson give him the better chance to do that? We saw what he did in Pittsburgh when he started beginning in week 7 for the Steelers. Everybody was optimistic. He made a lot of big plays, had that big game against the New York Jets. Things kind of crumbled down the stretch in those final 5 games, plus including the playoffs. The Steelers offense scored 14 points a game with Russell Wilson at the helm. The playoff game against the Ravens, they were shut out in the first half, didn't even score until the third quarter. And so we know that Russell Wilson is on the downward spiral now. This might be his last year in the league, let alone as a starter. But would you go with Jaxson Dart from the gate, or is that too risky a move in the state that the Giants are in right now?
I think it's too risky. We should also mention Jameis Winston's probably part of this conversation.
Yeah.
But I look at the Giants' schedule to open up the year. They play Washington, Dallas, Kansas City, Chargers, Philadelphia, Denver, Philadelphia, 49ers. I mean, those are some really good defenses in there. I don't know, with a new look offensive line that's still, trying to find out who their starters are, if you want to put Jaxson Dart into that situation. That's rough. Their schedule opens up in the second half of the year. You play teams with lesser defenses. I think that's probably what's going to happen. Give Jaxson Dart 2 or 3 months to kind of settle into this offense, get more practice reps, let Russell Wilson get the crap beat out of him, right? Like, honestly, like, that's probably what's going to happen, and then go to Jaxson Dart halfway through the season. But I don't think they're going to be playing Russell Wilson because he's the better quarterback option. I just think they want to protect their asset in Jaxson Dart and make sure when he's playing, he's ready.
Yeah, you talk about a trial by fire situation. I'm not feeding Jaxson Dart to the Wolves at the beginning of his career, especially with him coming from that gimmicky Ole Miss offense, that Lane Kiffin offense. I'm putting Russell Wilson out there and I'm letting him take his lumps. He's the veteran. He's faced tons of adversity throughout his career. If he can overcome it, great. And if he can't, then you know that once that stretch cools down a bit, that's when you deploy your 22-year-old quarterback who is going to need that repetition. I don't expect Jaxson Dart to be a great player from the gate. And Marcus, you and I have talked about this. He's probably honestly a quarterback who can benefit from a true redshirt rookie season where he doesn't play at all. But I also think that you're just going to be in a dismal state no matter what I can't see the Giants coming away from that stretch and still being very much alive. Like, they're going to be hurting. They're going to be in contention probably for one of the top picks through the first half of the season, just looking at the outlook right now. Now, maybe they'll shock us. Maybe the defense will be too good that they'll keep them in games, whatever. But Russell Wilson, we know, is not that guy at this point. We know that Jaxson Dart was drafted to be the guy. And so my prediction is Wilson starts the season. We get to the bye week or so, depending on how the Giants are looking in that stretch. And then Jaxson Dart comes in as the relief pitcher there for the rest of the season.
Totally agree. I think Dart is like some of these other quarterbacks that needs to sit because he's coming from a gimmicky offense. And the offensive line just needs to get better before he's ready to be on the field.
100%. All right, let's move on to the next one. And we're going to move away from quarterbacks for a little bit, and we'll talk about some skill players here. We're going to go to Los Angeles, and that is Najee Harris against Omarion Hampton. Harris, the veteran, former first-round pick, 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons. Hampton, the current first-round pick, younger, fresher, more athletic. We know this is going to be Hampton's job eventually. They have big investment here. If you draft a running back in the first round, you don't draft them to sit on the bench. So at the very least, we're going to see a split in the workload at the beginning, but that could even lean in Hampton's favor. And now we have this whole incident, Marcus. What was going on with the firework, Najee Harris? Like, did we ever get clarity on that situation there?
We got a statement from his agent that it was he did suffer an eye injury, but it's not anything that's going to prohibit him from being ready from week 1. It seems like it was just more of a I think it was like an upper eye, like above his eye in the eyebrow area. It doesn't really matter. He's going to be fine. He'll be ready for week 1. Very scary situation though. Lots of internet rumors always make these things worse, but I think the thing we know here is that these running backs are going to share touches during Hampton's rookie year. Like that much is clear. The reason why we're talking about this is, what is that split? Is it Hampton getting 75% of the touches and Najee getting 25? Is it flipped? We've seen Jim Harbaugh in previous years when he was with the 49ers. Sometimes he'll draft these running backs, early day 2, second round, third round, and they just won't see the field at all. And other times they'll get a bunch of work. So I think Najee is in a better situation than he was in Pittsburgh, with a better offensive line and a better quarterback. He doesn't fumble. He is a good pass blocker, and that will endear himself to the coaches. But Hampton is a way more talented runner, and it'll be fascinating to see how they decide to split these snaps.
Yeah, and I think if this is a true battle and they let the talent play out, you're going to be able to see that when Najee goes up for his reps and then Hampton does the same, and you see the difference in the level of explosion, you're going to want to run with Hampton. But there's just something about Najee. Tomlin loved him. He loved him during the pre-draft process. He gave him a butt ton of carries these past 4 years in Pittsburgh. And even though the efficiency wasn't there, 3.9 yards a carry, a average run success rate, well below average explosive play rate. He just continued giving him the ball, and he doesn't get injured and he doesn't fumble. And so I feel like Jim Harbaugh is kind of in the Tomlin wheelhouse where he's going to love guys who wants to operate his game plan. Najee fits that. I think that Najee is going to begin the season as a starter, but I think it's going to fizzle out very quickly. And when I say starter on paper, but we're still talking a split in carries, I think by week 3 or 4. And I think that that's all it's going to take, Marcus, to realize the difference in athleticism and explosion between Najee Harris and Omarion Hampton. I think the job greatly shifts into Hampton's favor after the first month of the season, even if Najee's still the listed starter.
I do want to mention that Najee Harris is somebody that Jim Harbaugh recruited at Michigan. He almost got him to go to Michigan. Instead, he went to Alabama. So this is somebody that Harbaugh has kind of had his eye on for a while. I do think he fits the Greg Roman offense where it's just you run downhill, be physical. Don't worry about trying to put on a bunch of different moves or break things outside. And we've seen running backs in this offense have a lot of success doing that. I think the best example of that is like Gus Edwards, who played in Greg Roman's offense in Baltimore and with the Chargers. And he was getting snaps even when J.K. Dobbins in 2020 was healthy and he was a rookie. So I think this is a good situation for Najee, but Hampton is the more dynamic running back. He's more likely to hit home runs. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Hampton a lot on early downs, and it's Najee coming in on short yardage and third downs and passing situations. But expect both of these guys to be on the field.
All right, well said, and I agree with that. Let's talk about another running back battle, Marcus, and one that you know all too well, and that is Dallas Cowboys, Javonte Williams against Miles Sanders. Both former highly touted players coming out of college. Their careers have not gone as planned, and their most recent sample size has not been exceptionally good. Like we talk about Sanders being one of the least efficient running backs in the NFL, Williams kind of following suit after the big knee injury there. How do you see this one shaking out? And by the way, Cowboys also have Jaden Blue. Is he going to get in the mix as well? But we would have to assume that the bulk of the carries is going to go to one of these two guys. First of all, the investments aren't huge here financially. Are both of these guys making the team? No. And then how do you see the distribution of touches playing out?
Yeah, I think only one of these running backs will ultimately end up making the 53-man roster. Okay. You'll have Jaden Blue being the guy that's probably playing on passing downs. And then maybe we'll see like Phil Maffa, who the Cowboys drafted as well this year, be the third running back. I wouldn't be surprised if Hunter Lipke gets a shot to be that guy as well. But I'm going to go Miles Sanders here and for a couple of different reasons. Number one, he's been the most productive of these two running backs. If you remember back in 2022, he was a Pro Bowl running back for the Carolina Panthers. He put up some big time, for the Philadelphia Eagles, put up some big time numbers, was very, very good that season. He goes to Carolina behind a bad offensive line with quarterback turmoil, and it just never really works. He's playing in an offense that is just not suited to his skill set. And now he's on Dallas, where the Cowboys are hoping with their offensive line, all their investments in that unit, he can become the player that we saw in Philadelphia when he was averaging 5 yards per carry throughout his career. If I had to bet, I think it's going to be Sanders winning the job just because he's the more dynamic running back. I know they like Javonte Williams, his ability to run inside, but I think it's going to be Sanders that ultimately wins this job.
I feel like Sanders, Marcus, is also a great example of why your health at the position and your situation matters so much as a running back too. And we saw that the difference between him and Philly and in Carolina was astronomical. And with the Panthers, he looked almost unplayable at times. I'll say the opposite. I'll push back here a little bit. I'll say Javonte, because of his youth, should theoretically have more mileage left on the tires too. I'll say that Javonte is the one that wins the job and Sanders is the odd man out. I just don't know what he's got left in the tank either at this stage of his career. And we'll see, because I think that it's kind of a toss-up between these two guys. I think it's anybody's guess right now. And then Jaden Blue obviously getting in the mix there. He will be the fastest, most explosive on the team.
Yeah. I will mention, I think these two running backs, Javonte and Miles, are also competing with other running backs who are on the market, whether they're in free agency or trades. I think if the Cowboys don't love either of these guys, they're not going to be hesitant to go out and throw a day 3 pick at a running back. And I do think there's some names out there, whether you want to go with a younger guy like Damian Pierce or Blake Corum, or if you want to go with an older running back like Alvin Kamara, who is on a Saints team that everybody projects to be one of the worst in the NFL. I do think guys like that are going to be available. So if neither of these guys work out, or it's just clear that they're not up to par, don't be surprised if the Cowboys make another move.
Yeah, and if both Williams and Sanders played like how they have as of late, Cowboys might be forced to do something like that. So an interesting situation. Keep an eye on Cowboys backfield during training camp this year. Marcus, let's talk wide receivers now, and just a three-way battle here, if you will, between the Green Bay Packers, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Doubs, and rookie Savion Williams. Suddenly, like, this is overcrowded. If you are an NFL team in need of a wide receiver right now, go out and make an offer to the Green Bay Packers. I think one of these guys, not Savion because he's the rookie, but between Wicks and Doubs, both of these guys should be up for grabs. They spent their first round pick on Matthew Golden. They have talent galore on this roster. Christian Watson recovering from that injury. How do you
Jaden Reed?
Jaden
We should mention Jaden Reed, who's probably going to lead the team in targets, yards, and touchdowns this year. So these guys, I think, are all competing for that wide receiver 3 role until Christian Watson gets back. Savion has the 3rd round draft capital. There's another guy we should mention, Mecole Hardman, who they gave a decent sized contract to this offseason. Romeo Doubs is an outside vertical receiver who does his best work in the contested catch area. And then there's Dontavian Wicks, who gets open all the time. He's fantastic after the catch. He just needs to be more consistent catching the ball. So it's all going to depend on what kind of receiver they want to pair with Golden and with Jaden Reed. My guess is it's going to be Romeo Doubs, just because I think he's the best fit with those guys. But in terms of talent, I do think it's Wicks.
I agree, Marcus. I think it's going to be Romeo Doubs that gets this wide receiver 3 job. He's been the guy that can catch the ball in traffic. He's been reliable. He's got the experience. It's going to take Savion a while. And if you watched him at all during his college career, he's very inconsistent. We don't even know what his true position is. Some people said maybe he can play some running back because he's not a natural receiver. He's a guy that I think you're going to have to engineer targets for. But looking at the scope of the whole wide receiver room here, Marcus, there's a player or two, including Mecole Hardman, that's not going to make this roster. And so I would almost have to venture a guess that before roster cutdowns, like, do you see the Packers trading one of these guys?
It's possible. They also just might hold on to all of them, knowing that the wide receiver depth across the league just isn't very good right now. And they'll probably be able to get more as injuries occur and as we get closer to the deadline. But yeah, you're talking about some guys like Romeo Doubs and Savion Williams, who could just not get any touches in any single week. And that's going to be hard for these guys, especially Doubs, who's in a contract year. He's going to want to try to get paid next offseason. So if he's 4th or 5th on the depth chart in terms of targets, I could see some receivers kind of grumbling and not being happy here. And that's one of the issues when you don't have a defined depth chart with your wide receivers. Everybody believes they're the best and they should get some touches. I do think Green Bay is eventually going to have to make a move. When that'll happen, I don't know, but it is going to happen.
You just don't see teams roster 7 wide receivers very often. And typically when you do, those final 2 guys have to play special teams. That's not really the case for these guys. These guys are all part of a large committee of young wide receivers who each want to get their share. They want to get their bag. They want to get their targets. And so when you have that many mouths to feed, I just don't see how this is going to work out without disgruntling somebody, which has already happened, by the way. Romeo Doubs last year was disgruntled with his workload. And so now you add Matthew Golden to the mix. You add Mecole Hardman to the mix, assuming he makes the team. It gets more complicated than it even was before, Marcus. And so I think my prediction here, one of these guys gets traded. I'm going to say this is just huge, bold prediction. I think Wicks gets traded. I think Doubs becomes the wide receiver 3. I think Savion becomes the wide receiver 4, who is groomed into being their version of a Deebo Samuel type player for them.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think Wicks, because he still has 2 years left on his rookie contract, probably would get the most in his trade anyways. Doubs can play on the outside. That allows Jaden Reed to play in the slot. Matthew Golden's going to be on the outside. Savion comes in as that fourth receiver, and McCole Hardman helps you out on special teams. I think that's probably how this works out the best. But I also could see them just holding on to Wicks because they think maybe he's the most talented receiver of the group. It's a fascinating situation to watch, and it's why we're talking about it, because I think we want to see who's playing for this Packers offense, which we expect to be one of the best units in the NFL.
Yeah, they're certainly deep. I'll give them that. There's nobody that has a wide receiver 4, 5, or 6 quite like the Green Bay Packers do right now. We're going to talk one more wide receiver battle here, and one that I'm very familiar with, Marcus, the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're looking for their wide receiver 2 opposite of DK Metcalf. Obviously, George Pickens is no longer there. He's in Dallas now. And so that battle is likely to come down to Roman Wilson, Steelers' 3rd-round pick from the 2024 season, or Calvin Austin, 2 players in very different stages of their careers right now. Now, I'd also mention they have an experienced Robert Woods, a 33-year-old Robert Woods there as well, who hasn't done anything in a few seasons now, kind of is there for that veteran piece, very much like how Van Jefferson was last season. I don't expect big things from him. I think that the Steelers are going to have to get something out of one of these 2 guys. Now, Austin is entering his 4th year, and he had a pretty respectable season last year, over 500 yards, 4 touchdowns, I think. Roman Wilson, on the other hand, is a guy that they have more invested in, and investment of this new GM, this new front office, and Omar Khan, Andy Weidel running the show now. Calvin Austin, if you remember, was a Kevin Colbert pick, one of the last picks of his era. So they might not be as attached to Austin, especially considering he's entering a contract year. Roman Wilson, on the other hand, has 3 years left on his rookie deal. Only played 5 snaps, though, last year because he dealt with a high ankle sprain in the very first padded practice of the preseason. And then in the middle of the season, when he finally comes back and looks like he's ready to play, suffers a soft tissue injury. And so now we're looking at these 2 guys here, knowing the situation quite well. I think that Austin is the guy that's got the endorsement from the wide receiver coach. I think that he's the guy that runs with the wide receiver 2 job early in the year. I like Wilson's talent better overall. He's still the guy that ran sub 4.4. He was still the number 1 receiver on a national championship team with JJ McCarthy in Michigan 2 years ago. He's the guy that I'm trusting in to figure it out. And I know that some have argued that he's a little bit behind the learning curve. That's expected when you miss almost your whole rookie season. I think by late in the year, Wilson emerges as a wide receiver 2 for this team.
So I just was listening to Mark Kaboli, who covers the Steelers, talk about the wide receiver room, and he was saying that according to the coaches, the gap between DK, again, this is the coaches, DK Metcalf and Calvin Austin is smaller than the gap between Calvin Austin and every other receiver on the roster, which shouldn't be. I mean,
I don't know if I'm buying that, but go ahead.
I agree. But I think it shows you that kind of where they're at with Calvin Austin. When you have the wide receiver coach coming out and saying in the offseason that Calvin Austin is the wide receiver 2, it's not like coaches to be that definitive in the offseason, but maybe that shows you how much trust they have in Calvin Austin. And I think on paper, he does fit really well with DK Metcalf because he's the quick underneath receiver that can make plays after the catch. He's got experience. He's made some big plays in the NFL already. Whereas Roman Wilson, we've seen nothing so far. No catches, nothing so far. It's going to take him a while to get up to the speed of the NFL. Calvin Austin is already there. I do think Roman Wilson is going to be the 3rd receiver, but if I had to bet on who's going to get the most targets in this offense outside of DK Metcalf, I do think it's going to be Austin.
Yeah, I think that Austin is going to get that wide receiver 2 job as well. And it's important to remember that Jonnu Smith, Pat Freiermuth are in the mix for targets as well. Tight ends, obviously. But when we're talking wide receiver strictly, the curve has been correct for Austin. It's how you want it to be now. His first season, he suffered a broken foot in training camp, didn't play at all. And so it comes in, and this guy begins his career at the mercy of Matt Canada's offense with Kenny Pickett throwing the football. So it was not, he was in some unfortunate circumstances there. Last year, by far his best of his first 2 seasons that he actually played so far. And if that trajectory continues, we could be talking about a 700 or 800 yard wide receiver this year. Now, the one thing that I will say is very much on the table still is even after trading for Jonnu Smith, the Steelers could go out and get another wide receiver, especially because Omar Khan has been so aggressive recently Juwan Jennings might be up for grabs. We'll see if he's a guy that becomes available. We just talked about the plethora of Green Bay Packers wide receivers, one of which could be on the trade market here by the end of training camp. And so I would not put it past this organization that's been uber aggressive recently to try to ensure that they win a playoff game right now, to go out and trade for a wide receiver. And in doing so, what it would do is it would bump down Calvin Austin to wide receiver 3, Roman Wilson to wide receiver 4, and those guys would get their chance maybe the following season.
And I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think it's going to be a big name receiver. Like, I don't think it's going to be Chris Olave or anything like that, because I just don't see Pittsburgh trading assets to go ahead and pay Chris Olave $28-30 million a year when you've just done that with DK Metcalf. Like, you can't burn that many assets on a receiver in one offseason. But I could see it being somebody like, and again, I know this is not a sexy name, Allen Lazard, who Aaron Rodgers loves. And actually, I think fits with this offense, right? He's a big blocking receiver who can do some stuff in the middle of the field. And Calvin Austin continues to be the slot guy, the guy that moves around and makes plays after the catch. Jennings actually is the better version of Allen Lazard. So if you do that, I understand that as well. But I think that's the type of move Pittsburgh would be looking for at receiver, a older veteran receiver that doesn't cost a bunch. But I do think ultimately Calvin Austin is going to be the guy who becomes the number 2 target in this offense.
All right. Training camp starting off here real soon. The rest of them, by the time that we do this show next week, are going to be ready to kick off, and we will have more coverage on that. Please come back and join us next time on the Stack in the Box No Huddle show, and thanks for joining us today.